Imagine that you are listening to the radio on a quiet Sunday night. You are enjoying some music when suddenly you hear a news flash that interrupts the program. It says that there have been strange explosions on Mars and that scientists are puzzled by them. You are curious, but not too worried. You think it is probably some natural phenomenon, or maybe a hoax. But then, another news flash comes in. It says that a huge meteor has crashed near a small town in New Jersey, and that a crowd of people has gathered around it. You are more interested now, and you wonder what it could be. Maybe a piece of a satellite, or a rare mineral. But then, something shocking happens. The news reporter who is at the scene tells you that the meteor is not a meteor at all. It is a metal cylinder, and it is opening. And from inside it, something is coming out. Something horrible. Something that looks like a giant squid with tentacles and eyes and a mouth that shoots fire. Something that is killing everyone who gets near it. You can't believe what you are hearing. You think it must be a prank or a mistake. But the reporter sounds terrified, and his voice is cut off by a loud scream. And then, silence. You are stunned. You don't know what to do. You wonder if this is really happening, or if you are dreaming. You wonder if you are safe, or if you are in danger. You wonder if anyone can stop these creatures from Mars. This is not a nightmare. This is not a movie. This is what happened on October 30th, 1938, when Orson Welles and his Mercury Theater on the air broadcasted a radio adaptation of H.G. Wells's novel The War of the Worlds. The War of the Worlds was one of the first and most famous science fiction stories ever written. It was published in 1898, and it told the story of how Martians invaded England in the late 19th century, and how a few human survivors tried to escape and resist them. Orson Welles was a young and brilliant actor and director who had his own radio show called the Mercury Theater on the air. He wanted to make his show more exciting and original, so he decided to adapt The War of the Worlds for radio, but with some changes. He set the story in modern America instead of Victorian England. And he used a format of fake news bulletins that interrupted a regular music program to make it sound more realistic and thrilling. He did not intend to deceive or scare anyone. He just wanted to create a good show for his listeners and to have some fun with them. He even announced at the beginning and at the end of the broadcast that it was fiction and that no Martians were actually invading. But some listeners did not hear those announcements. They tuned in late, or they missed them because they were distracted or switched channels. They only heard the news bulletins that described the Martian attack as if it was really happening. And they believed them. They believed them because they sounded very convincing and detailed. They used real names and places, and they had realistic sound effects and voices. They also matched the mood and the fears of the time. In 1938, the world was on the brink of war, and people were anxious about what could happen next. They were also exposed to new technologies and media that they did not fully understand or trust. So when they heard that Martians were landing in New Jersey, and that they were destroying everything with their heat rays and poison gas, they panicked. They panicked because they thought it was true, and because they did not know what else to do. They called their friends and relatives to warn them or to say goodbye. They called the police, the newspapers, and the radio stations to ask for help or for confirmation. They packed their cars and fled their homes, hoping to find a safe place. They prayed and prepared for the end of the world. Not everyone panicked, of course. Most listeners realized that it was fiction, or they found out soon enough by checking other sources or by hearing Wells's disclaimer at the end of the show. But enough people panicked to cause a sensation. The next day, Welles woke up to find himself famous and infamous at the same time. His face and name were on every newspaper headline in America, along with stories about how his broadcast had caused mass hysteria and chaos across the country. Some of these stories were exaggerated or false, but they made Welles look like a genius or a villain, depending on who you asked. He had to face a lot of questions, criticisms, and lawsuits from the media, the public, and the authorities. He apologized for any inconvenience he had caused, but he also defended his artistic vision and his right to free speech. He said he did not expect anyone to believe his broadcast, because he thought it was too silly and improbable to be taken seriously. The War of the Worlds radio drama became a legend in American culture. It showed how powerful and influential mass media can be, especially in times of crisis and fear. It also raised questions about how media creators and consumers should behave and think. How far can fiction go? How much can we trust what we hear? How do we distinguish between fact and fiction? These questions are still relevant today.